I'm here to present to you a brief term about the zoological aspect of ethology. When we see in our worldly environment, we meet different kind of people, starting from people who are aggressive to people who are very mute and very calm persons. In similar way, animal kingdom also have different kind of animals with different sets of behavioral aspects. So going on to ethology, we can say that it is a scientific study of animal behavior. So each animal has its own behavioral sets, and as a word term ethology suggests, ethos means to study this a character, and ology is always leading to a method of study. So ethos is always related to the characteristic of an animal, and ology means the study. So ethology is the scientific study of animal behavior. Going on to the next slide, we can see that ethology is a scientific and objective study of animal behavior, usually with two aspects in its mind. And the first one is one focus of behavior under natural conditions and also on the basis of it as an evolutionary adaptive trait. So the ethologists study mainly on the comparative approach on the basis of five different patterns. The first one is kingship, second one is parental investment, third one is the conflict, fourth one is the sexual selection, and finally the aggression. So the comparative approach can be limited to these five topics, but it can also be taken into the specialized areas of many different parts of environmental aspects. So the kingship is always between the relatives, and the parallel investment. How much the effort the parents or the other organisms spend for this offspring is known as the parental investment. And conflict always happens during the sexual selection and the mating period. So the sexual selection, the kind of different adaptation, the plumages of the bird, they all comes under the sexual selection. And finally, the aggression, how they defend their own territories, they all come under the aggression. So these all study come under the ethological aspects. Going on to the next slide. What is the study of animal behavior can be divided into two different kinds. The first one is ethology, second one is comparative psychology. So ethology is basically an observation rather than an experimental science. So we go on to the forest environment or the natural condition of the animal, and we go on to observe the animal for many decades and finally study how the animal behave under such kind of natural condition. So this animal behavior is always based on the context of anatomy as well as on the physiology. But on the other side, for the comparative psychology, it's basis on the experimental aspects. Rather than going on to the natural condition, they are limited to the experimental aspects. So these animals can only, the developmental traits of these animals can be studied only according to these human psychological aspects rather than its natural conditions. So depending on that, it is also having its own strengths and limitations. As you can see in this image, there is a man posing for a selfie, and with him there is two mountain silverback gorillas posing just like him for a selfie. So that's a kind of ethological trait with these animals show. So these animals, what they do under what conditions, they all learn under those natural conditions, which is more precise, but it have its own limitation that some species are elusive. We cannot observe them at concentrates such as snow leopards, mountain leopards. They're all very elusive creatures. So in order to observe such kind of animals, we have to stay in for many long periods of time. It might take decades to see how these animals behave. Going on to the next one, the comparative psychology, we can take this animal to the experimental aspects and we can delimit the study to maybe few years, 10, 15 years, maybe a maximum. But it has its own disadvantage that these lab conditions are always artificial. So under the natural conditions, these animals cannot behave. Only under experimental conditions they can behave, and the experimental results are always limited to few factors. So these are the main strengths and limitations of ethology as well as comparative psychology. Going on to the next slide. These are the three main doyens of the field of ethology. The left one is Konrad Lorenz, and who is the main father of the ethology and who has devised main different concepts, fundamentals of ethology such as fixed action pattern, and those all kind of activity patterns are always devised by the scientist. Second one is Carl von Frisch, who is mainly attributed to the bee dance behavior, how these bee communicate. This is always found by this eminent scientist, and finally Nicholas Tinbergen, who is mainly related to the supernormal stimuli and who was found that in the animal kingdom is this scientist, and these three have contributed immensely to the field of ethology starting from its initial phase till now, till date. So these are the Nobel laureates who have found many different aspects of ethology. Next slide, we are going to find about the innate behavior. Innate behavior of an animal is always limited to its own itself. Rather than its environmental aspects, the animal behaves from its own genome set. That's the definition for that. The behaviors that are closely controlled by genes with little or no influence from the environment is called as innate behaviors. So if an animal showing is an innate behavior, if suppose a geese is showing a behavior of aggression, every geese of that family will show that same aggressive behavior despite of its environmental condition. If it is in Kerala, or if it is in another state, or if it is another continent, the geese will show the same aggressive trait. So these innate behaviors do not have to be learned or practiced. No one has to teach a geese to fly. It learns its own itself from the imprinting of the mother. So the innate behaviors are also rigid and predictable. That's very common thing. That doesn't change from any species to another species. They're always rigid and predictable. And finally, the innate behaviors usually involve basic life functions such as food habits as well as caring for the offspring. So these are all in the genome set rather than studying from another animal or from its own parent. So these are the innate behavioral aspects of an animal. And Konrad Lorenz, one scientist which I have seen in the other slide, who has revised this innate behavior. This is an example for innate behavior. This is the gray lag geese, which is scientific name is answer. This geese is mainly an eminent example for innate behavior. If this geese finds its egg rolling off the nest, it just picks it back to this nest. So this is an innate behavior. Even though it hasn't been taught by this parent, it has its own innate mechanism to take that egg rolling from the nest back into it. So the innate behavior in this geese is so intense that if we place any other objects such like a cue ball or like a wooden block, even though it is not the shape of this egg, it just takes it back to the nest. That's an innate behavior mechanism. It doesn't think that it is an egg or any other thing. It just sees it and just takes it back. That's an innate behavior, and just they follow this blindly. That's an example for this geese. So if you take the innate behavior mechanism, we can also find a similar thing in humans. If you see the slide, we can see a wonderful, beautiful baby with beautiful eyes, soft protruding cheeks, a small nose, very beautiful lips. So we intend to take that baby in our hands, babble with him, say some few words to make him laugh. That's all kind of a human action. That term is called as fixed action pattern. That is also a pattern like changes which is happening in humans as well as in the animals. This action pattern is an instinctive behavior sequence produced by a neural network known as the innate releasing mechanism in response to an external sensory stimulus. In the case of baby, we are seeing the baby as an external stimulus. So we are responding to take that baby in our hands, babble with him, say a few words to make him happy. That's all kind of the fixed action pattern plan which we show. Similar way, the geese which you have seen in the other slide, the answer, the gray lag geese also shows the similar kind of behavior of taking the egg rolling from this nest back to its nest. That's a kind of fixed action pattern and cannot be changed. Any humans seeing this such kind of baby will never go like in an aggressive manner. They always follow the same pattern. So one of the key ideas of classical ethology is fixed action pattern, and there are stereotype behaviors that occur in a predictable, inflexible sequence in response to an appropriate stimulus from the environment. So going on to the next slide. That's another thing which I said. If we see a baby like that, there's a human universal fixed action pattern. That's the main contribution of Lorenz. Lorenz claimed that caring for the young and the associated affective response are known as FAB. These are the sign stimuli. If we see a baby with a head in large proportion to the body, we tend to care for that baby. Similar way, if we see a fluffy teddy bear like doll, the children is always, especially the girl child, is always tend for caring for that such kind of fluffy thing as a young one. And if we see in this slide, if you are male or a grown up, we always show funny faces to the child. That they all come under the fixed action pattern. Then these are all different kind of things such as protruding forehead, large ears, eyes, small nose, short thick extremities, rounded body shape. They all trigger, they are all external stimulus for the fixed action pattern. So starting from a simple geese to a complex organism like humans, we can see this kind of pattern, and it doesn't changes with the species. So such kind of thing is very common in the environment, and we can see it throughout the animal kingdom, but it requires a lot of patience to understand such kind of behavior throughout the ages. So this is my slide for you, and thank you all for listening and for this patient time to see and learn about the initial and the fundamental aspects of this ethology. Thank you.